The next plant I'd like to talk about is one of my favorite plants, not just as a medicine, but as a plant I just like to be around and gather. And that plant is Skullcap. The genus of Skullcap is Scutellaria. Scute, like if you know your turtle anatomy, and I'm sure many of you out there do know your turtle anatomies, the scute is like a piece of the outside shell that, if you look at turtles, there's segments of the shells, and each segment of that shell is called a scute. So what does Scutellaria and the scute of a turtle shell have to do? And that is, in Latin, scute means plate. And so why is Skullcap, Scutellaria, have the word plate? And the reason is the protuberance, or the little piece sticking up on the skullcap calyx. So if you go from here and look at the photo of skullcap, you'll see the little plate that sticks up on the calyx, which actually is very obvious and very useful for identification of Scutellarias. So the plant is skullcap, the genus is Scutellaria, and there are many species of Scutellaria in the United States, and probably in Canada. I'm not sure about how far south they go, probably somewhat south. The family is the Lamiaceae, the mint family, sometimes called the Labiatae or Labiatae family. It's actually a more northern family, the mint family. That's what they are, the mints, tend to be a more northern temperate family. So skullcap is one of them. Not the easiest plant to identify when it's young until you start to really get a sense of it. It looks a lot like lycopis or bugleweed, which they're in the same family. But you're most likely going to gather skullcap when it's in flower. And when it's in flower, it's easy to tell because it has the little scute, that little protuberance, my finger doesn't do it justice, on top of the calyx. What species to use? My friends like Joshua Muscat, an herbalist in the Bay Area, he likes the species that grow out there and he uses them a lot. He's a big skullcap fan. For me, I use the species that grows here more, which is Scutellaria lateriflora. And that's kind of the official skullcap, but it seems like many skullcap species work. And Kiva rose, I'm forgetting the species, Kiva rose uses the skullcap. It might be Scutellaria resinosa. If I'm incorrect, we'll just put it somewhere else and correct it. And that grows around her in the southwest deserts. And so Kiva calls skullcaps blisswort. And so that seems apparent why she would call them blisswort. So if you want to see more information about skullcap in Kiva's lecture, she's also done things for Herb Mentor or learningherbs.com. I'd recommend her information as well. So I guess there, so we have Joshua in California using his skullcap, Kiva Rose in the southwest in New Mexico, and me over here in the east. And all of us really like the Scutellarias that grow near us. And so I recommend getting to know the Scutellarias that grow near you and giving them a try for all the things we're going to talk about with skullcap. The parts used, most of the plant works. It depends on how thick the stems are. In general, skullcaps have pretty thin stems, and so really the whole above ground part of the plant, so not the roots, but the above ground parts, are the medicinal part. That said, you do have to take wildcrafting ethics into consideration. Skullcaps are, all the ones I know are native, and you don't want to just gather them willy-nilly. You know, you want to make sure that you leave lots of skullcaps to reseed themselves. So they tend to be annuals, or at least Scutellaria lateriflora, the northeastern skullcap, which also grows in the northwest, by the way, is a native. So make sure that, you know, over-harvesting your skullcaps, learn how much they are and where to find them. The one out here likes to grow in wet places. So once a year, in August, I go to my special wild crafting skullcap spot, and I gather the skullcaps. I pick, you know, I walk a couple of miles and pick plants out and get a bunch, and then I blend it. So I chop it up, the skullcap. Sometimes I blend it, sometimes I chop it up. It cuts really easy, and I tincture it 1 to 2, 95% fresh. Skullcap, though, so I use the fresh above ground plant tincture for medicine, but I want to say that the dried plant for tea works. And the reason I'm reiterating that or iterating that is for years I didn't think dried skullcap did very much. And then working in the Ithaca Free Clinic, I just needed nervines more often, which is what skullcap does. And all I had a lot of at that point was dried tea, and people loved it. A lot of people came back for the dried skullcap. So it's also useful as a tea. So now let's talk about uses. Skullcap fits an array of uses. And I would say that its main use in my mind is as a nervine. So nervines are herbs that nourish the nervous system, as opposed to sedatives that kind of lower people's excitability level or anxiety level down. Skullcap can do that, but I really like Skullcap for people to take regularly who have a tendency to fly off the handle, to get overexcitable for whatever overexcitable is for them, and to take it regularly. So one way of saying that is for people who are more worrywarts. Another way for that are people who can just really, I guess, worrywarts or just get tight and stuck. And when situations get condensed, and it's hard to think of a way out. So they could use it then, but more regularly. So that kind of situation, that kind of getting stuck, happens a little bit less. But I think anybody can benefit from Skullcap, honestly. So while I sometimes paint these patient pictures, these energetic constitutional pictures or personality pictures, I think that any dosha, any type of person, if Skullcap works for them. So personally, Skullcap does nothing for me. One year I decided to eat like 15 plants. I mean, eat the plants. I figured if anything's going to work, and I have very little effect from Skullcap. Didn't taste that terrible. There's a lot of plants to eat. The reason I'm saying that is not so much telling you that you cannot harm me with Skullcap if you want to put me to sleep at a conference. I'm saying don't judge how a plant works by how it affects you, because many people love Skullcap. Kiva Rose is not calling Skullcap blisswort for no reason at all. So it's important to understand that and so that means, so for someone like Kiva, that it works for her doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. It's just important to take it out of personal context and experiment and ask people how Skullcaps work or how any plant works. So I like Skullcap as a nourishing nervine. So who do I give it to in first aid? I give it to my compatriots, the people I'm working with, before they get into the first aid situation, to take it regularly. So the students that come with me to these things who haven't worked in first aid and get very tight and nervous and overwhelmed in their head, I like to start them at Skullcap, whatever the dose is. It could be anywhere from a few drops once a day to a couple of dropperfuls many times a day. Again, the dosage of Skullcap is from very small amounts here and there to very large amounts very regularly. It just depends on how it works for you. Skullcap itself, as long as it's not adulterated, seems to me a very non-toxic plant. In other words, while some people might have effects from it that they don't like, I don't know if I know anybody who's gotten sick from it, has vomited or got terrible headaches. Maybe, can probably say somebody's gotten headaches, but that's not a toxic reaction. So to kind of come back to the point, no toxic reaction, like no crazy negative body problem that went on for a long time after they took the Skullcap. So a pretty safe herb that way. Some people it doesn't do much to, and then there are some people where a couple of drops of Skullcap will work as a sedative. So a sedative is different than a nervine. People take sedatives when you're kind of in the throes of it to kind of bring your energy level down, to calm you. And for some people, Skullcap works really well that way. The other thing about Skullcap is that it's a skeletal muscle relaxant. So when I talked about black cohosh as a skeletal muscle relaxant, I talked one of my favorite 3 herbs making up a skeletal muscle relaxant is pedicularis, which we haven't covered, black cohosh, and Skullcap in equal proportions. So the pedicularis, the lousewort, same names, and black cohosh are very specific for skeletal muscle relaxing. And I think the Skullcap just adds some oomph to it and also maybe more in the mind. So the body relaxes and the mind relaxes from the pain associated with skeletal muscle pain. So like, let's say lower or upper back pain. So very helpful there. So Skullcap is useful both as a sedative and a nervine. Some people also use it as a sleep aid. The technical word for sleep aid is a hypnotic. And for some people it will help. I think it works best, though, as taking regularly as a nourishing nervine tonic, and then just taking more as necessary to reduce anxiety or to help people sleep. Again, the dosage is everywhere. So Skullcap, I tend to carry a big bottle of Skullcap with me, like a 4-ounce or 8-ounce in my first aid bag. The reason is Skullcap often will work, you just need much larger amounts of it. So I really like Skullcap, and I also feel like it augments other herbal relaxing formulas. So I will use it with black cohosh as a skeletal muscle relaxant. I might use it with valerian as a sleep aid. I might use it with passion flower for somebody who's really caught up in the moment and can't relax. So skullcap augments and helps other herb formulas work a little better. So I'm just a huge fan of skullcap in this way. So nourishing the nervous system, augmenting other formulas, and also taking enough necessary to reduce people's, to help just lower people's threshold of anxiety, or just really not threshold, but just lowering anxiety, lowering stress. You just need to give large amounts. I don't think of skullcap particularly good for physical pain in the sense of, I don't think it helps so much like stopping the pain, right? Some things are more anodyne, stopping pain. I think of skullcap as helping relax the person so the pain is less tense in their body. So I definitely use skullcap in pain formulas. I use it with Basidia, Jamaican dogwood. I use it with California poppy. I use it with wild lettuce. But I often think in my mind, the skullcap is more about reducing the tension associated with pain, because pain has that as an aspect to it, than just reducing the pain by itself. So I hope you have a sense of how to use skullcap. I would recommend carrying larger amounts of skullcap tincture. Good fresh plant tincture is the way that I would recommend it, whatever species you use. And just try it with different people. If it doesn't work for a few people, skullcap works fantastic for certain people. So it's a matter of just finding out who it works for and then bringing it with you and suggesting that herb to those folks.